Imagine for a moment that everything you've ever been told about Jesus is only a fragment of the truth. Imagine that behind the familiar stories, the miracles, the parables, the crucifixion, there lies a hidden dimension of his teachings, one so profound that it was never meant merely to be believed, but experienced. What if Jesus was not only a savior, but a guide to the awakening of divine consciousness within you? What if the true message of Christ was not about worshipping him from afar, but about realizing the Christ within yourself? This is not blasphemy. This is not heresy. This is a journey into the mystical heart of what Jesus truly taught, the wisdom that transcends religion, time, and dogma. By the end of this video, you will never see Jesus the same way again, because the final revelation, the last and most powerful truth, will not only change how you see him, it will change how you see yourself. Before we dive into these hidden teachings, take a moment to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. What you're about to hear may challenge everything you thought you knew, but if you stay until the end, I promise, you'll understand why ancient mystics, Hermetic philosophers, and enlightened sages all saw in Jesus not just a man, but a mirror of the divine potential within every human being. Let us begin by asking a simple question. Who was Jesus truly? Not the image crafted by centuries of institutional interpretation, but the living consciousness that spoke in parables, walked among the people, and dared to say, "You are gods." Throughout history, countless scholars, mystics, and seekers have attempted to uncover the secret meaning behind his words. The renowned scholar Elaine Pagels, known for her work on the Gnostic Gospels, revealed that early Christian texts once carried a message far more mystical than what survived through Orthodox tradition. These writings describe Jesus as a revealer of hidden knowledge, a teacher who came not to create a religion, but to awaken an inner realization. In the Gospel of Thomas, a text discovered in the sands of Egypt after being lost for nearly 2,000 years, Jesus says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This is not the language of external salvation. This is the language of inner alchemy, of transformation through awareness. Think about this for a moment. Why would such teachings have been suppressed? Why were some of the earliest followers of Christ branded as heretics for claiming that the divine spark lives within each soul? Could it be that the true power of Jesus' message was considered too dangerous, not because it threatened the soul, but because it threatened control? Throughout the ages, mystics have whispered of the Christ consciousness, a state of being in which the individual becomes aware of their unity with the source, the divine, the eternal. The Hermetic texts written centuries before the birth of Christ declared, "As above, so below, as within, so without." Is it possible that Jesus was echoing this timeless truth, that heaven is not a distant place but a state of consciousness? When he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he was not speaking metaphorically. He was unveiling a cosmic reality, that the divine realm exists not in the clouds, but in the awakened heart of the human being. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine what that means. Imagine that the power Jesus displayed to heal, to forgive, to love without limit was not meant to be admired but emulated, that every miracle was a mirror showing us what humanity is capable of when fully aligned with the divine within. Could it be that the true resurrection is not merely an event that happened 2,000 years ago, but an eternal process, the awakening of the divine self from the tomb of ignorance? These are not new ideas. Great thinkers such as Meister Eckhart, the 14th century mystic, wrote, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me." He was persecuted for these words, yet their meaning resonates with the very essence of Jesus' message. The divine is not separate from us. It is us seen through the eyes of understanding. As you listen, ask yourself, what if the Christ was not a name but a state of being? What if Jesus came to show that enlightenment is possible here, in the human form, and that every soul carries within it the seed of that same light? In the next moments, we will uncover the esoteric teachings that reveal how Jesus' words align with ancient Hermetic, Egyptian, and Eastern philosophies, wisdom that points to the same universal truth. But remember, each revelation builds upon the last, and the final one is the most powerful of all. the one that unites the spiritual and the human in a way that could transform your understanding of existence itself. Because once you see what Jesus truly meant, you can never unsee it. Imagine walking through the ancient lands of Galilee, where the air was heavy with dust and mystery, and hearing Jesus speak not as a preacher of rules, but as a revealer of cosmic truth. Every parable he told carried layers of meaning, one for the crowd and another deeper one, for those who had the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Those who followed him closely often reported that his words were alive, charged with energy, as if the universe itself vibrated through his voice. This was not mere charisma, it was the transmission of a higher frequency of consciousness. Many esoteric scholars, such as Rudolf Steiner and Paramahansa Yogananda, suggested that Jesus embodied what is known as the Christ vibration, a divine energy that transcends personality. It is not limited by time or space, because it is the eternal Logos, the Word, spoken at the dawn of creation. According to Hermetic philosophy, the Logos is the divine principle that organizes chaos into order. The Gospel of John begins with that same mysterious statement. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Could it be that this was a direct link between the ancient Hermetic understanding of cosmic order and the spiritual identity of Christ? When Jesus said, "I am the light of the world," he was not merely referring to himself as an individual. He was revealing that this light is the essence of all beings, the consciousness that animates every soul. He did not come to claim divinity for himself alone, but to remind humanity of its forgotten divinity. The mystics of old understood this. The early Gnostic sects, long before being suppressed, taught that within every person exists a spark of the same divine fire that animated Jesus. They called it the nous, the inner knowing, the eternal link to the source. To awaken that spark was the true salvation, a liberation not from sin as punishment, but from ignorance of who we really are. Think about how revolutionary that idea was. If people believed that the divine dwelt within them, they could no longer be controlled through fear. They would live from love, not guilt. They would no longer see God as a distant ruler, but as the very essence of their own being. Perhaps this is why Jesus spoke in parables. The truth he carried was too powerful to be handed directly to those unprepared to understand it. He planted seeds of realization in the hearts of those who listened, seeds that could only grow when the soul was ready. The parable of the mustard seed, for example, is not just about faith, it is about consciousness. A small seed, when nurtured, becomes a vast tree. In the same way, a small awareness, a moment of spiritual insight, can grow into the full realization of divine unity. The kingdom of heaven, he said, starts as something invisible within you, but expands until it fills your entire being. Every miracle Jesus performed also carried symbolic meaning. When he healed the blind, he was not only restoring physical sight, he was opening the inner vision, the third eye, the capacity to perceive divine truth. When he turned water into wine, he symbolized the transformation of base matter into spiritual essence, a process that mirrors the alchemist's great work. And what about the resurrection? In esoteric interpretation, the resurrection represents the triumph of spirit over matter, consciousness over illusion. It is the awakening of the soul that realizes it was never truly dead, only asleep. As you reflect on these symbols, ask yourself, could it be that the life of Jesus was a living initiation? That every act, every miracle, every teaching was a stage in the sacred journey of transformation, a roadmap for the soul? This idea resonates deeply with Hermetic and Egyptian mystery traditions. In the ancient temples of Egypt, initiates underwent symbolic death and rebirth rituals to transcend the limitations of the ego and unite with the divine light. The story of Osiris, the god who was dismembered and resurrected, reflects the same archetypal pattern that appears in the story of Christ. Both symbolize the eternal truth that the soul must die to its illusions before it can awaken to its divine reality. But Jesus went beyond symbols. He embodied the truth. He became the bridge between heaven and earth, the visible and the invisible, the human and the divine. He demonstrated through his life what it means to live in perfect harmony with the source, to be both fully human and fully divine. And here lies one of the greatest mysteries of all. When Jesus said, "Follow me," he was not asking for blind obedience. He was inviting humanity into transformation, to follow him not to a place but into a state of consciousness. He was showing the way to awaken the same divine light that dwelled within him. Modern spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle once wrote that the resurrection of Christ is the arising of Christ consciousness in each of us. This statement echoes the same timeless wisdom that Jesus himself tried to communicate, that the light he carried was not exclusive, it was universal. But how can one awaken this Christ consciousness today? How can you, listening right now, begin to experience what Jesus meant when he spoke of the kingdom within? In the next part, we will explore the inner path, the practical, spiritual journey that leads from ignorance to illumination, from human limitation to divine realization, and the revelation that comes next may be the one that changes everything you believe about yourself. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing in complete stillness. The world fades, and all that remains is awareness itself, silent, infinite, and luminous. This is the state that mystics throughout the ages called the kingdom within. It is not found through rituals, dogmas, or beliefs, but through the direct experience of being. And this is precisely what Jesus was pointing toward. His words were never meant to create separation between humanity and God. They were meant to erase it. He often withdrew to the mountains or the desert, not to escape the world, but to commune with the source in silence. This solitude was not isolation, it was alignment. In silence, he tuned his consciousness to the divine frequency of creation itself, and through that attunement, miracles became natural. Because when a person realizes their oneness with the source, reality responds to their awareness like a mirror to light. Ancient Hermetic philosophers described this same process in their teachings of inner transformation. They spoke of the great work, the transmutation of base consciousness into spiritual gold. To the untrained eye, this sounded like the literal practice of alchemy, but to the wise it was always symbolic. The true alchemy is the purification of the soul, the lead is ignorance, and the gold is divine awareness. Jesus embodied this alchemy in every act of compassion, every parable, every healing touch. When he forgave his executioners, he demonstrated the final stage of this great work, the transcendence of the ego. He showed that true power is not domination, but surrender, not revenge, but unconditional love. To awaken this Christ consciousness within yourself, you must begin where he began, with awareness. Notice how often your mind identifies with fear, anger, or desire. These are the illusions that keep the soul asleep. Jesus called them demons, not because they were external entities, but because they are the forces within us that separate us from divine truth. When he cast out demons, he was symbolically liberating consciousness from ignorance. This interpretation is supported by mystical thinkers like the early Christian ascetic Evagrius Ponticus, who wrote that the demons are our thoughts. His insight, centuries ahead of modern psychology, shows that Jesus' miracles were not only outer events but inner teachings. Every healing was a reflection of spiritual awakening. Imagine then that the words, "Take up your cross and follow me," were not a call to suffering but to transformation. The cross is the intersection of the horizontal, the world of matter, and the vertical, the realm of spirit. When consciousness awakens at that intersection, it transcends both. That is the secret of the resurrection, to rise beyond duality, beyond life and death, and realize the eternal nature of being. This message is found not only in Christian mysticism, but in nearly every ancient tradition. The Hindu sages called it Atman, realizing Brahman, the soul recognizing its unity with the Absolute. The Buddhists called it enlightenment, the awakening from illusion. The Hermeticists called it the union of the above and the below. Jesus, in his simplicity and divine wisdom, called it the kingdom of heaven. But how does one enter this kingdom? He gave the answer plainly. Unless you become as little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. The innocence of a child is not ignorance. It is purity of perception, seeing the world without judgment, without fear, without the burden of conditioning. To return to that state is to awaken the divine light within, the same light that Jesus embodied fully. Consider what would happen if humanity understood this message. Wars, hatred, and division would lose their meaning because everyone would recognize the divine presence in each other. Religion would cease to be a system of control and would return to its original purpose, to reconnect the soul with its source. Modern physics even echoes this truth. Quantum theorists such as David Bohm spoke of the implicate order, a hidden reality in which all things are interconnected and arise from one undivided whole. What Jesus called the Father may well be what science now calls the unified field of consciousness. The language is different, but the truth is the same. There is only one expressing itself through infinite forms. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he was describing this realization, the collapse of separation. And when he added, "You are in me and I am in you," he was extending that realization to all humanity. The tragedy is that for centuries, the world chose to worship the messenger rather than live the message. But this truth has never been lost. It has been guarded in symbols, whispered in mystical writings, and preserved in the hearts of those who still seek the light. From the desert fathers of early Christianity to the Sufi poets of the East, all have spoken of the same experience, the divine union that dissolves all barriers. Rumi, the great Sufi mystic, once said, "I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God." His words mirror the essence of what Jesus taught. The divine is not somewhere else. It is what you already are, beneath the layers of illusion. Now, as you listen to these words, let them resonate deeply. You are not a being seeking God. You are consciousness remembering itself. And this remembrance is the true rebirth that Jesus promised to those who could see beyond appearances. In the next part, we will unveil the final and most powerful revelation, the hidden meaning behind Jesus' most mysterious statement, "The Father and I are one." You will discover why understanding this truth is the key to transcending fear, death, and limitation itself. Because once this final truth is seen, the illusion of separation dissolves forever. Imagine standing at the threshold between heaven and earth, where silence meets eternity, and realizing that the voice you once thought belonged to God was never separate from your own. This is the deepest truth that Jesus came to reveal. Not that he alone was divine, but that all are divine, and that the realization of this truth is the path to freedom. When he said, "The Father and I are one," he was not proclaiming his uniqueness. He was speaking from the awakened state of unity consciousness, the same state that every soul can attain when it transcends the illusion of separation. The Father represents the infinite source, the eternal intelligence that gives birth to all things. The I represents the individualized consciousness within you. When the veil between them falls, what remains is oneness, the pure awareness that animates all existence. This revelation was considered too radical for its time. To say that the divine dwells within each human being was to challenge every system of power built on fear and obedience. Yet this is the secret that the mystics of every era have protected. St. Francis of Assisi, centuries later, echoed the same truth when he said, "What you are looking for is what is looking." He understood that God was not something to be found outside, but the very essence of the one who seeks. Now think about what this means for you. Every thought, every emotion, every breath arises within that same divine field. The light of Christ is not a historical event, but a living flame within your consciousness. It has never been extinguished, only forgotten. To remember it is to awaken. To live from it is to embody the Christ. In the esoteric traditions, this awakening is known as gnosis, direct knowing. It is not belief, it is experience. It cannot be given by scripture or taught by doctrine, only discovered through inner realization. This is why Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." He was not speaking of intellectual knowledge, but of the moment the soul recognizes its own divinity and breaks free from illusion. The crucifixion, when seen through this lens, takes on a completely different meaning. It becomes the ultimate symbol of transformation, the death of the ego, and the rebirth of the spirit. When Jesus said, "It is finished," he was declaring the completion of the great work, the full union of the human and the divine. And when the tomb was found empty, it was a sign to all who would come after that consciousness can never be confined by death. This is the true resurrection, the awakening of divine life within you. Every time you choose love over fear, forgiveness over judgment, awareness over reaction, you resurrect a part of that light within yourself. Each moment of compassion is a small resurrection, a quiet miracle that brings heaven a little closer to earth. Even science now hints at this hidden unity. Quantum physics suggests that all things are connected through an invisible field, that the observer and the observed are one. The mystics of old knew this not through theory, but through direct experience. They saw what Jesus saw, that the entire universe is alive with divine intelligence, and that separation is only an illusion born of unawakened perception. When Jesus taught his followers to pray, he began not with "my Father," but "our Father." Those two words carry the secret of all creation. The divine belongs to no one and to everyone. It is the shared consciousness that breathes life into all beings. There is no other. There is only the one dreaming itself through infinite forms. Now ask yourself, what would your life look like if you lived from this awareness? How would you see the world if you recognized every person as another expression of the same divine essence that lives within you? How would fear, anger, and sorrow transform if you saw them as passing waves on the surface of an ocean that is eternally still and infinite? This is the invitation of Christ, not to believe in him, but to become what he revealed, to awaken from the dream of separation and live as an embodiment of divine love. When you forgive, you are the Christ. When you give without expectation, you are the Christ. When you see beauty in all things, even in suffering, you are the Christ. This is the mystery that religions tried to describe, but words could never contain. The infinite within the finite, the divine playing as the human. It is the same light that shines through the stars, through the heart, through every act of kindness that ever was. So perhaps the real question is not whether Jesus was God, but whether you can recognize that God within yourself, the same awareness that looked through his eyes, that still speaks in the silence of your heart. The mystic Jakob Boehmer once said, "For I myself am heaven and hell." His words mirror what Jesus showed through his life, that heaven and hell are not places, but states of consciousness. Heaven is the awareness of unity, hell is the forgetfulness of it. The choice is ours in every moment. And maybe, just maybe, this was the true second coming that Jesus spoke of, not his physical return, but the awakening of Christ consciousness in humanity, not an event in time, but a revelation in the soul. The light that once walked among us has never left. It waits within us, ready to rise again. Now, as these words come to a close, take a deep breath and remember, you are not separate from the divine. You never were. The same power that moved through Jesus moves through you now. And when you open your eyes to that truth, you will understand why he said, "You will do the works that I do, and even greater." Because the Christ is not a person. The Christ is consciousness itself, the eternal light shining through every awakened heart. And once you see this truth, you will never see Jesus or yourself the same way again. Thanks for looking.